I can paint you a picture of how that would work and how it's worked in the past, where we've tried to artificially hold prices down. Competition doesn't come in. People don't, like if beef is too high, people don't move the chicken. The competitors don't come in to undercut where the beef prices are. Nothing works when you try to artificially control prices. It's just a supply and demand issue. It's a flawed idea.
So did you have a question here?
Yes. Why would you propose a flawed idea when the real problem, if you really want to help the middle class, if you really sincerely want to help people having trouble at the grocery store, it's not price gouging that's the issue.
All right. So last week over on CNBC, anchor Joe Kernen brought out Elizabeth Warren to talk about Kamala Harris's anti-price gouging proposal, but he got so triggered by the policy that he forgot to even ask her a question about it. But today, Kernen one-upped himself by bringing on two guests for an interview. But before he could even introduce them, he launched into a heated debate about how awesome rich people are and how awesome corporations are and how our government should be protecting and enriching them, which is apparently the opposite of taxing them. So for context, Kernen was so furious this morning because he feels that neither Harris nor Trump are proposing good economic policies. Let's watch.
The idea that you're going to raise a lot of money through tariffs and not have it be inflationary does not make a lot
lot to me. Like so many bad populist ideas, they're on both sides.
They're on both sides. And
Biden left the tariffs on.
I don't know if I've gotten older and
U.S. Steel,
or if I just look at this
merger.
And I think everything both these candidates are saying is
what did you? So I did watch different clips. The child tax credit thing.
The child tax credit is crazy. Thinking that you are going to raise enough money in these tariffs not only to balance the budget, to then roll out all kinds of spending and to pick up child tax to pay for child care expenses basically for everybody doesn't make any sense.
And even the 15% just on domestic companies is industrial policy. Right. Now, on one side, you're going to get industrial policy from that's all they do on the left. But the right should give you a choice. They shouldn't be, pandering in the same morass, which doesn't work.
He brought up.
Okay, so that leads us to Kernen's interview on the topic of Trump versus Harris's tax policies. So he had two guests that he wanted to talk to. He invited them. They were Roosevelt Forward Director Elizabeth Pancotti and America First Policy Institute Chief Economist Michael Faulkender. But you wouldn't know that from Kernen's introduction or lack thereof. Take a look.
This guy that we got coming on, Michael, might be able to explain it. Elizabeth, I don't know, I read the notes. Elizabeth, you're just going to tell me raising or cutting taxes on the wealthy as if corporations are a code word for the wealthy. I just don't understand that because
I don't think that's true at all.
Okay, aren't you saying that's all he wants to do is cut taxes for the wealthy? Why is cutting taxes on corporations for the wealthy? Why is that for the wealthy?
I think there's both. I think one, we know that capital income represents for the top households represents a huge amount of their income relative to wage income at the bottom. And so when those corporations do better or when they're given tax breaks, that flows to the top households. But I don't think that
so that's a bad thing. Seriously, Elizabeth, that's a bad thing. Who do you think provides the jobs in this country and the people that work at those companies that pay the taxes to afford everything we do? The government can't provide jobs. Who's going to pay the government workers? The government doesn't have.
The government is in fact the largest employer in the United States.
Yeah, exactly. And where do you get the money to pay? Where do you get the money to pay those employees?
All right. So then the debate got even more heated after that, but Kernen did finally remember to introduce his guests. Here's the clip.
I think that there's this false reality that trickle-down economics has worked for the past 50 years. And in fact,
just answer me. Where do you get the money to pay the government employees? Just answer that. That's all I want you to answer.
Revenue from both households and corporations.
It all flows down from the private sector. I'm sorry to tell you. Michael, can you explain?
How many jobs were created by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act?
Elizabeth Pancotti, Roosevelt Forward Director, and Michael Faulkender, America First Policy Institute Chief Economist.
All right, so I don't love the way he keeps cutting her off and assuming he knows what she's about to say before she says it. But is he really trying to push trickle-down economics right now? Pancotti did try to point out that hasn't worked for most Americans for the past 50 years. But again, he kept talking over her, so it was hard for her to get that out. Cenk, what do you make of this part of the discussion?
Hey, don't scroll away. Come back. Because before the video continues, we just want to urge you to lend your support to TYT. You power our honest reporting. You do it at tyt.com/team, and we love you for it. Yeah, actually, I want to talk about both parts. I love the beginning because it was like the perfect example of the establishment. And CNBC is the only channel that might be more establishment than Fox News. So they're all sitting around going, oh, can you believe what they're gonna do to our poor corporations? We can't have this kind of populism. Populism is very dangerous, very dangerous. Remember, the rich and the corporations should definitely be in charge and get more tax cuts. Okay, I like the smell of panic in the morning from establishment CNBC anchors. Okay, now, then when it turns to why populism is bad, but wait a minute, what do we mean by populism? There's a lot of different proposals. So the tariffs, I think, are a bad idea. Would they lead to inflation? Definitely. If you did price controls, that would be a bad idea. Regulating against price gouging is not a bad idea at all and is done all the time under emergencies. And how about the one that Kamala Harris proposed about private equity and being able to block them from buying residential property? That's a populist idea that is incredibly popular and would be very effective and would affect our housing prices more than any other policy. That's a terrific populist policy. So this idea of like populism bad, establishment awesome, you're being ridiculous. And it's actually kind of embarrassing to watch, no nuance at all, just corporate propaganda. Then he turns to the guest and then it got more embarrassing. So first he starts with, oh, you're saying that corporate tax cuts are just going for the wealthy. That's ridiculous. And then she proves that they do go to the wealthy. And if you notice, you can go back and rewatch the tape. He then immediately switches and goes, well, I mean, where do you think the money's coming from? In other words, oh, so the corporate tax cuts do affect the wealthy. They do go to the wealthy, thank you for the admission. And then he turns to, yeah, but you know what, we're the ones paying taxes, okay? Where do you think it comes from? And again, now that's the second absurdity. So thank you for the admission that this corporate tax cuts are all about giveaways to the very wealthy. But if you say that, well, the taxes come from the private sector, that doesn't mean that we should do perpetual tax cuts. That doesn't answer the question of what should the tax rate be? Just because it comes from the private sector doesn't mean it should be 0. It also doesn't mean it should be 100. But shutting down the conversation with, that's ridiculous. The private sector, the wealthy are paying everything. Now those poor corporations, we have to cut them. No, we don't have to necessarily cut them. What is the optimal tax rate? And when we grew the economy and created the greatest middle class the world has ever seen, the tax rate sometimes was in the 70s and 90s for the highest brackets, marginal tax rates. Now, I'm not saying we go back there. I think that's way too high. That's not where I would strike the balance. But you're not having an intelligent conversation about what the rates should be. Instead, you're trying to browbeat someone on the left because you think I've got to protect my poor billionaire corporate friends who pay my salary to be a CNBC anchor. Be honest for the first time in your life. Mark.
Yeah, there was an arrogance about that response that was associated with the browbeating that Cenk's talking about, and also the sense that, you know, if it weren't for the rich people and the highest tier of earners in this country, your lifestyle and America really wouldn't exist. I mean, honestly, that was the extension of what he was saying. Where is all this money coming from? Where is all the government money that's associated with all of these job hires coming from? It's coming from the richest Americans and from corporate leadership. When we know, when you give corporate leadership a break, when you give these corporations a break, they use their money to buy back their stock, build up their stock price, big bonuses go out, and we talk about the capital revenues. They were even referenced in that piece. And the idea somehow that the rich get richer just based on capital investments is something that's really kind of a loathsome fact. But the fact that it could be paraded around as some virtue associated with the American economy is really grotesque. I thought the whole thing was, man, Kernen's really getting comfy on CNBC. I mean, you talk about a bubble, that's the Wall Street bubble.
Yeah. So I want to just drop this in real quick before we have to wrap. But Bill Gates actually said that who is an actual billionaire, he said that he should be paying higher taxes. So it's interesting to hear this take from Kernen. He did say, if I designed the tax system, I would be tens of billions dollars poorer than I am. The tax system could be more progressive without damaging significantly the incentive to do fantastic things. So Cenk, we'll just wrap this up real quick. How do you feel feel about a statement like this coming from Bill Gates? He's getting a little bit of a side eye from me, as in, that's easy for you to say now that you've already got your billions, and they're probably not going to go anywhere anytime soon.
I hear you, but I'll take it. Anytime somebody wealthy and a successful businessman says, duh, obviously we're paying too little in taxes. The whole point is it was originally to incentivize to invest, to build companies. Mission accomplished. And basically he's saying, I would have done that if I only made 100 billion anyway. The rest was just gratuitous. And he's obviously right about that. So if you're a progressive, I would say take the win on Bill Gates' comment there. And he's also correct. And Kernen should look into actual successful businessmen and find out what actually makes sense instead of just sitting there doing propaganda. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.